PR was not even in my hindsight. I actually got very sick. I was diagnosed with Cushing syndrome, which is a very rare disorder. I went through a pretty rough time after that happened. So it took me off my game, had to be out of work for a little while. And what pulled me out of the kind of negative headspace that I was in after that happened was listening to other people. 5, 6, 7 years later, I got into a marketing program, a PR program. I started learning and developing my skills. And very quickly, I realized I'm on this path for a reason, and it's to help other people share their story because they are affecting the people that are listening to them. You're not going to affect everyone, but if you can help one person that's listening to you, it makes the world of difference. So my job is to help amplify those stories.
Welcome to the latest edition of Adeptus On-Air, and today we have an awesome guest in Nicole Magagnin, founder of Growth Grabber. Nicole, thank you for joining the show. Looking forward to our conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So just walk me through the first steps of your idea and how you came up with the business of Growth Grabber, and what is the premise of the business and what was the origin?
Absolutely. Well, to tell you a little bit more about the business and how I got into it, I do actually have to give you a little bit of a backstory on kind of what led me down this path. Coming out of school, back in the day, PR was not even in my hindsight. I went to school for business. I did a bunch of careers in my 20s. And then something happened in my mid 20s where I actually got very sick. I was diagnosed with Cushing syndrome, which is a very rare disorder. Turns out I had a tumor on my pituitary gland and had to have that taken out.
Wow.
This story is not really about, what happened to me, but what happened afterwards. Went through a pretty rough time after that happened. Just life happens, right? So it took me off my game, had to be out of work for a little while. And what pulled me out of the kind of negative headspace that I was in after that happened was listening to other people, music and other people. I had to listen to other people's stories. Now, at that time, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. Podcasts were not a thing. So I think YouTube was just coming around. So I read a lot of personal development books, and I was listening to YouTube, listening to these motivational speakers or people that would speak on their stories on how they overcame challenges and how they overcame different things in their life to reach that success. And whether they realize it or not, and I'm sure a lot of them do, they are saving people in that audience. And I'm one of those people.
Wow.
Yeah, it kind of hits you. So fast forward, 5, 6, 7 years later, I got into a marketing program, a PR program. I started learning and developing my skills. And very quickly, I realized I'm on this path for a reason, and it's to help other people share their stories. Because whether maybe it's not something overcoming an illness or an accident or something tragic, it could just be something wonderful happening in their life. They are affecting the people that are listening to them. You're not going to affect everyone, but if you can help one person that's listening to you, it makes the world of difference. So my job is to help amplify those stories.
Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know the story behind it, and that's tremendous. And how long was that process of growth for you? Did this happen over the course of, say, a year or 4 or 5 years, or how long was that from your
I would
illness?
say, yeah, I would say the healing process when I really started taking back my life was probably about a year or two before I kind of got everything settled. And I'm like, okay, what's next? Where do I have to go from here? Because I survived, multiple surgeries at that point, because I had a failed surgery and then another one. I was like, I survived. I survived for a reason. I just don't know what that reason is yet.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't until many years later when I realized, okay, when I got into PR and I realized how I'm helping people, how I'm helping them develop their stories, I was like, yes, okay, this is the reason why I'm here. Not only to share my own story, but to help them share theirs.
That's amazing. Wow, that's amazing, Nicole. And how'd you come up with the name Growth Grabber? Is that something that just came to you, or was it a process over time, or how'd you come up with the name?
I'm very big on alliteration. Like, I wanted something that was catchy, that you're not going to forget, but also does exactly, it describes the company perfectly. We grab growth for people. And that can be interpreted several different ways. One thing being in the PR industry, you mentioned it early on. Visibility is everything. You're on a podcast. You help businesses with the same thing with Adeptus. We just do it from a different angle. So I think I want to get into that a little bit later about the differences between, some PR companies, but we really wanted to just tell people exactly what we do and make it very simple.
I love it. I love it. And you mentioned what's your overall, I guess, macro take of the attention economy that everyone's fighting for? I feel like, as soon as I open my phone, everyone's saying, look over here, watch this, see that, just how this didn't exist when we grew up, so it's relatively new in the overall sense. But what's your overall take of the attention economy and how it could be monetized and used for good and sometimes for bad, unfortunately. But just what's your overall take of it?
Oh, you're absolutely right. And it was funny. I was just having this conversation with my partner the other day. We have a little bit of an age gap, so I kind of laughed about it a little bit. But growing up in the 90s, the early 2000s, you realize how quickly technology has changed just in those past like 30, 40 years. Before that, it was very slow progression,
Hmm.
but especially like since I would say like mid 90s to now, it's just one thing after the next. The minute you're onto something, something newer comes out that's going to grasp your attention. Now, of course, there are the few things that have stayed. Um, I wouldn't even say they're long term at this point. They're long term in our perspective because everything is so in short, like 7-second bites at this point. But YouTube has stayed, Facebook has stayed, Instagram has stayed, and TikTok still up in the air on that one, but it has made a huge dent in the market overall for attention. And that's something that we've actually pivoted business to a little bit, is focusing people's attention from whether it's helping influencers on the platform itself, transferring things like this, their podcast clips onto those platforms, but also then how to monetize them afterwards.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what are some of your favorite? I don't know if gig is the word or whatever, but things that you book for clients and things like that. What has worked? What has worked for your clientele? More so than others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being in PR is a very weird space right now. As you know, being from that side that you said, you study journalism a little bit, but it's changed, right? The media landscape has changed. It has gone from we were reading newspapers and magazines to digital publications. And nowadays, I think that there is a little bit of a disconnect with traditional media, right? I think there's a disconnect with journalists. Now, mind you, I think there's a difference between like the political space and the business space, but there still is just a distrust with the media. So if people don't even go there to read or view the media, who is that helping? Now, there's still great audiences on there. However, they can't just be static on there alone. Now, our business has mainly pivoted. We still do like the digital publications, TV appearances, things like that. But our primary source of getting people on is things like this on podcasts. There's just so much more opportunity for people as far as taking the video clips like we're on now and posting them to other media outlets. I really take advantage of trying to teach my clients how to leverage those opportunities. And that's kind of where I go into the difference that I mentioned earlier between other PR companies. PR companies can get you on a, in a magazine, on TV, maybe even on a podcast. What they fail to do is teach you that ROI factor. How do you now leverage that attention? How do you leverage those placements for bigger and better opportunities? How do you leverage them to get ROI? And most people, they don't know that. They don't know how to teach their clients that.
Yep. No, well said. Well said. Because that's something that can be difficult for the client to see, before they do it. And I want to ask you about that. I'm sure there's different spectrums, but how receptive are clients, to doing that part of it? Because they may be, their craft may be in music or writing or some kind of creative thing or whatever, where they may not see it right away as far as doing the PR side of it. But how receptive have they been to the message and to that part of it?
I think most people realize that at some point, especially in a business career, they need some sort of PR, whether that's major media or something, maybe a little, well, I wouldn't even call podcasts small at this point because the audiences rival traditional media. So they realize that there's an opportunity there, or sometimes they don't realize how big the opportunity can be, which is why, like on my platforms myself, I try and share a lot of information, statistics on, the type of audiences that are on podcasts, the decision makers, who is your specific audience type. So when I work with people, I try to not look for random random shows to get them on. That's not going to help them. We try to be very specific and get them with podcast shows, magazines, where their audience is, so that they can monetize.
Like kind of a difficult question here. I know the landscape and the mediums have changed, but have the fundamentals of PR, the things that we learn in school and things like that, and have that part of it changed with the landscape and the mediums changing? Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I think, to be honest, not a lot has changed in the PR world in general.
Mhm.
The basic principles are the same. Of course, now with the age of AI, right? More people are using different AI tools. They're using tools to craft pitches, to craft strategies, to sometimes even reach out to journalists. Overall, with those things, I think there's still that aspect missing. Now, don't get me wrong, I use AI in my business to to a certain extent. There is still a very human aspect that needs to go into that in order to make it believable, real. People still want that human connection. And so the basic principles of PR are the same. Some of the tools we use are a little bit differently. But overall, one thing that AI cannot replace is that human connection, the relationships that we build with the hosts, with the journalists, with the editors, how we're able to, kind of leverage our relationships on the back end.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm sure I remember in journalism school growing up, said all attention isn't good attention, but it seems nowadays even bad attention draws a lot of eyeballs and sometimes followers and things like that. What's your take on that? Going back to the attention economy kind of thing, where that's kind of almost kind of king in a way. The more you can draw attention, the more you can do whatever else you want to do in terms of your product or your craft. But negative attention is that still the same as it always was? Say 15 years ago before social media, etc. Because a lot of stuff on my feed comes down to sometimes half of it's negative.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You said that lifelong quote, right? All attention is good attention. I was never a believer in that.
Mhm.
I was never a believer in that. And don't get me wrong, things that are, I think there's a difference between bad attention or negative attention and controversial attention.
Hmm.
It's a fine line, but it is very different. And I think nowadays, in the age of social media, where information spreads so fast,
Yeah.
it's almost uncontrollable. And I could think of something recently that's going on. And I don't know if I don't want to mention the company, but there's a baby product company that's kind of going viral right now for um, some very controversial things that are put on their products. That's extremely inappropriate. And what's happening is, like, yes, they are getting attention on their social media as far as people want to see what they're talking about, but there's also a mass cancellation of their doctors don't want to recommend their products anymore. And these are people with huge platforms that are telling other people don't use them. All the, political stuff going on the past couple of years with people are spreading the word on, you know, not necessarily banning, but boycotting, right? Certain companies and industries. And I think we're getting more information from social media these days than we are in some of the traditional media sources. So a lot of people are looking towards influencers, whether they be political influencers or lifestyle influencers. People are looking towards these people with millions and millions of followers on where to go next. And there are bad opinions and bad attention that can lead you to definitely losing a career and your income from social media. One of my clients, it happened to
Oh wow, wow. Can you tell me
a
that story?
former a former a former client, which I'm
Thank-
very grateful for that I wasn't working with him at the time. But it's very unfortunate that things like that can happen, and they do happen.
Can you
And I've
expound?
seen the repercussions of it.
I was gonna say, can you expound on that without telling too much? Just
I
in
can.
generalization, what happened, what went wrong, what advice did they not listen to, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually, when we worked together, we had a very successful campaign to the point where, we grew, a YouTube channel from having less than 200 subscribers to having over 8,000 within a
Oh,
6-month period,
wow,
monetizing, um, took trips to different states to do podcasts and to have appearances and things like that. Even they gained a contract, even though they didn't go on it due to personal reasons, but had an opportunity to gain a contract to go tour on colleges, and ended up losing everything because of a lie.
mm, wow,
Because of a
wow,
lie that did not need to be told. And that's the sad part. And everyone around this person, personal life, professional life, even myself, nobody knew
wow,
about it. And then it came out, and they've basically been off of social media completely since then. And it's been about a year.
wow. So all that work, all months and maybe years of work that went into building something up, got torn down that quickly. That's kind of the world we're living in now. Um,
Yeah,
I want to ask you about timing, Nicole. How important is timing in in your world in PR, and how much does that help to be able to nail things at the right time to get the kind of exposure that you want for your clients?
absolutely. I think timing somewhat depends on the industry you're in. Of course, in the PR world, there's sales cycles, right? So if you have a product or a service, well, really more a product, you kind of have to follow the retail the retail cycle, right? It's Christmas time. It's Mother's Day coming up. Valentine's Day just passed. There's certain campaigns that go along with certain themes throughout the year, and in journalism, especially, there are certain themes that hit multiple times throughout a cycle. However, for me personally, one thing that I love doing is not necessarily focused on a particular industry. What I love to do, which also has a benefit for me, I love to help the CEOs, the leadership, right? Because that's what really sets their business apart is the thought leadership behind the CEOs, right? They are the face of their company, whether they like it or not, which that also kind of reminds me of a funny thing happening on social media right now, which is the McDonald's CEO. I don't know if you've seen this.
Yeah, he bit the burger and yeah.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Now that is somebody where coming from a PR person looking at that, I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have put this guy on camera because there are now a million jokes about it. Now, in that sense, it's not necessarily negative attention, it's more controversial attention.
Yep.
Maybe he doesn't have media training. Maybe, he's just uncomfortable on camera. It could be talking about the product and service, whether he eats his own product.
Yeah.
But these things you can see. Me and you saw the same video. It goes viral. People talk about these things. As far as how it also helps me working with leaders, we're able to craft not only their own story, but the business story as well. And because I work with different industries, it changes all the time.
Mm.
That makes my brain my brain happy a little bit because it helps me solving new problems in different ways.
That makes sense. That makes sense, man. It's a complex world, and it's changing ever so often. I want to ask you about perception versus reality, especially nowadays in 2026. The line seems as blurred as ever, and just I guess I'm asking, how much does that matter? I guess the truth and reality always matters, but it seems perception travels just as fast, or if not faster. And people's perception can be two different things. We could see the same thing and have two different views on it. But what's your take on that, coming from a PR lens of perception versus reality? When it used to be more black and white, now things are a bit more complicated.
You hit the nail on the head. Things absolutely are more complicated. And I think one thing I always tell my clients or just people in general, anybody who wants to know, perception is reality.
Mm,
It is on the receiving end.
yep.
I can be talking to you and a crowd of 10 other people, and every single person might have a different perception of me, but whatever their perception is real in their eyes.
Good point. Yep. Good point. So you have to watch that message. Wow. I know that's definitely it's definitely interesting. Growth grabber. Where do you see growth grabber in the next 3 to 5 years? Where do you want to grow, improve? Where do you see the company going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that is definitely in the works. I have a couple of things that I'm working on the back end, but this year, one of my goals is well, I actually just finished halfway hosting an event for a client. So I have a client that's overseas. So we managed it from here. It was an event in Paris at their boutique location, and we were able to help with the design, help with the itinerary, help with actually reaching out and getting influencers there. And it went off great. It was extremely successful. We were also able to sign a lot of those influencers up to now continuously promote the brand and be brand ambassadors for the clients. So we're super excited about that. Um, Now we're thinking about possibly the same brand has a small shop in Atlanta. So we're going to be hosting another event coming up in a couple of months. And that seems to be the trend going on, especially for clients that have like actual physical products, is hosting events for them and then eventually hosting events for myself, just learning events, personal development.
That's awesome. That's awesome, Nicole. And where can we find your work? Where can we find Growth Grabber? Your social channels, website, things like that, so our audience can definitely check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. I keep things very simple. My website is just www.growthgrabber.com. I know I did provide a link. I think you're going to be posting it in the description for everybody. But from that link, you can connect to all my social channels, my website, as well as I did provide on there a way that people can get a little more information to help develop their own story. So there's actually a free download on there for people.
That's awesome. Now I encourage everyone to check out Nicole and Growth Grabber. What a great thing you're doing, Nicole. And no surprise that you're already on a successful track and have a great story, behind it. So thank you so much for sharing your story with Adeptus On-Air, and thanks for sharing your expertise and insight, Nicole. Really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus On-Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.